Hi, Yoav, and welcome to this week's Top 5 Security Facts. A surface-to-air missile fired from Syria exploded in the air over northern Israel on Wednesday, triggering air raid sirens in the town of al-Fam and the smaller communities in the northern West Bank. There were no reports of casualties, but some debris did land on the ground and triggered a small fire. In response, the IDF struck back at several Syrian anti-aircraft sites, including radar and missile batteries. Syrian media with reports of 1 soldier killed and 5 wounded in the strikes. And the IDF announced earlier that the Joint International Juniper Cobra exercise, which normally takes place annually with the U.S. military in March, has been postponed this year. The U.S. canceled it due to tensions in Eastern Europe and fears of a Russian invasion of Ukraine. The exercise, which is primarily intended to train the air defense systems of the U.S. and Israel, involves the country's primary air defense batteries, which are now deployed in Eastern Europe on operational alert. And officers from Israel's EGOZ unit will be stripped of their position following a fatal incident of friendly fire last month that killed 2 fellow officers. A probe into the incident said that the EGOZ unit had, quote, a culture of failing to report and investigate, and displayed lapses in judgment and patrolled in dangerous ways. Investigators were particularly troubled that the shooters were not inexperienced recruits, but were instead veteran commanders that repeatedly flaunted military guidelines and protocols. The investigation concluded that had the chain of command been properly observed, the fatal shooting would not have happened. The 2 soldiers were conducting an unplanned search for stolen night vision equipment in January when they were encountered and shot. This incident came shortly after the military changed its rules of engagement to allow soldiers to open fire on suspected thieves. And while the U.S. and its allies continue negotiating with Russia to prevent an escalation on Ukraine's borders, Moscow announced the start of a large-scale military training exercise in Belarus along Ukraine's northern front. 10 days of military drills were described by the White House as escalatory, though Russia has repeatedly denied any plans to invade Ukraine. This is despite amassing more than 100,000 troops at the border. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron continues his own diplomacy and met Ukraine's President Zelensky Tuesday after a stop in Moscow for talks with President Putin. And Ukrainian forces are training in one of the most hostile environments on Earth, the Chernobyl exclusion zone. Soldiers train for urban combat and counter-sniper operations in the radioactive ghost town left behind from the 1986 reactor meltdown. The location does have some benefits. The area is entirely abandoned, meaning exercises can be done with live ammunition, giving the soldiers a feel for how their equipment will behave in combat. The second reason is more pressing. Some military analysts have suggested the exclusion zone is a possible advance route for Russian forces. The area is radioactive to prevent long-term habitation, but short-term military maneuvers would still be possible. While the exclusion zone does present a direct route to Kiev, the terrain is difficult and swampy. It would be very difficult to move tanks through. In addition, some parts of the zone are far more radioactive than others, even too dangerous for short-term exposure. That's it for this week, but stay tuned for the top security news from all around the world.